What if I told you there's a completely legal strategy that allows wealthy people to live like kings while paying virtually zero taxes? And when they die, their heirs get to keep everything without Uncle Sam taking a bite? You probably think I'm selling you some sketchy offshore scheme or pyramid scheme nonsense. But here's the thing that might shock you. This isn't some elaborate tax evasion plot cooked up in the Cayman Islands. This strategy has been hiding in plain sight for over a century, and it's so elegantly simple that a law professor had to give it a catchy three-word name just to help people understand how the ultra-wealthy stay ultra-wealthy. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time diving into the financial strategies that separate the rich from everyone else. If you're tired of watching billionaires pay lower tax rates than teachers while you're getting hammered every April, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button if this information opens your eyes to how the game is really played. The strategy I'm talking about is called buy, borrow, die. And before you roll your eyes thinking this is another get rich quick fantasy, let me be crystal clear about something. This isn't a strategy you can implement with a few $100s in your checking account. We're talking about a wealth preservation technique that requires serious money to make it work, but understanding how it operates will completely change how you think about taxes, investing, and why the wealthy seem to live by completely different rules than the rest of us. Professor Edward McCaffrey at USC came up with this phrase back in the mid-1990s, not to help rich people get richer, but to explain to his students why our tax system seems so fundamentally unfair. For years, academics and tax professionals dismissed his explanation as overly simplistic. They probably thought he was dumbing down complex financial concepts for college kids who couldn't handle the real intricacies of tax law. Then 2021 rolled around, and ProPublica dropped a bombshell investigation using leaked IRS data that proved McCaffrey had been right all along. The wealthy weren't just paying lower tax rates than working class Americans, they were paying almost nothing. Here's where things get interesting and frankly a little infuriating if you're someone who actually pays taxes. The buy, borrow, die strategy exploits completely legal provisions in our tax code that have existed for decades. This isn't about finding loopholes or bending rules. This is about using the system exactly as it was designed, just in ways that most people never knew were possible. Let me break down how this works, because once you understand the mechanics, you'll never look at wealth the same way again. The first component is the buy phase, and this is where wealthy individuals make a fundamental choice that separates them from almost everyone else. Instead of earning traditional income that gets taxed, immediately they focus on purchasing appreciating assets that don't produce regular taxable income. We're talking about stocks that don't pay dividends, real estate that increases in value, art collections, private company shares, and other investments that grow quietly in the background. The key here is that these assets can appreciate in value for decades without triggering any tax obligations whatsoever. As long as you never sell them, the government can't touch those gains. It's like watching your net worth climb higher and higher while the IRS sits on the sidelines, unable to collect a single dollar. Think about how different this is from the way most people build wealth. You go to work, earn a salary, and immediately get hit with income taxes, Social Security taxes, Medicare taxes, and whatever your state decides to take. Then you try to save what's left over, maybe put it in a retirement account or buy a house. But the wealthy flip this entire script. They buy assets first, let them grow tax-free, and figure out how to access that wealth without ever triggering a taxable event. Now, you might be wondering how someone lives off assets they never sell. After all, you can't pay your mortgage with unrealized capital gains, and grocery stores don't accept stock certificates as payment. This brings us to the second phase of the strategy, which is arguably the most brilliant part of the entire system. The borrow phase is where the magic really happens. Once you have substantial appreciating assets, you can use them as collateral to secure loans. Modern financial institutions have created sophisticated lending products specifically designed for this purpose. Securities-based lines of credit allow wealthy individuals to borrow against their investment portfolios. without having to sell a single share. Here's the beautiful part from a tax perspective. The government doesn't tax borrowed money. Think about that for a moment. If you borrow $1 million against your stock portfolio, that $1 million flows into your bank account completely tax-free. You can use that money to buy houses, cars, vacations, or anything else your heart desires. And the IRS treats it as if it doesn't exist. The terms on these loans are typically quite favorable for wealthy borrowers. Interest rates are often lower than traditional bank loans or home equity lines of credit. Lenders might advance 70 to 80% of the value of stocks and bonds, and even more for Treasury securities. The larger your portfolio, the better rates you can negotiate. Some wealthy individuals can borrow at rates as low as 2 to 3% annually. But here's where it gets even more interesting. While you're borrowing against your assets, those assets continue to grow. If your portfolio is earning 7 or 8% annually and you're paying 3% interest on your loan, you're still coming out ahead. Your wealth keeps compounding while you access liquidity without any tax consequences. This creates a perpetual cycle that can theoretically continue indefinitely. As your assets appreciate, your borrowing capacity increases. You can take out larger loans or refinance existing debt at better terms. Meanwhile, you're living off borrowed money while your actual wealth grows untouched in the background. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds too good to be true. What happens when the loans come due? What if the assets decline in value? What about all that accumulated debt? This is where the third phase of the strategy comes into play, and it's the part that really shows how our tax system favors inherited wealth over earned income. The die phase isn't just a morbid play on words, it's the culmination of a wealth preservation strategy that can span multiple generations. When someone using this strategy passes away, their heirs inherit the appreciated assets through something called stepped-up basis. This is where the tax code essentially gives the wealthy a massive gift that most people don't even know exists. Under current federal tax law, when you inherit assets, you receive them at their current market value, not at the price the original owner paid for them. All those capital gains that accumulated over decades simply disappear for tax purposes. If your grandmother bought stock for $10 a share 50 years ago, and it's worth $500 when she dies, you inherit it as if she paid $500 for it. All that appreciation becomes tax-free forever. This means the heirs can immediately sell the inherited assets without owing any capital gains taxes. They can use the proceeds to pay off any outstanding loans, and whatever is left over becomes their tax-free inheritance. The family wealth not only survives the transfer between generations, but it often emerges stronger than before. The numbers behind this strategy will absolutely blow your mind, and they'll probably make you question everything you thought you knew about how wealth actually works in America. Let me walk you through a real-world example that shows just how powerful this system can be when you have the money to make it work. Me, Maria, a successful entrepreneur who managed to accumulate $1 million through years of building and selling businesses. Now, Maria could do what most people do with a windfall like this. She could buy a fancy house, some luxury cars, maybe take a few expensive vacations, and slowly watch her nest egg shrink as she pays taxes on any investment gains along the way. But Maria understands the game that wealthy people play, so she takes a completely different approach. Instead of spending her $1 million, Maria invests it in a diversified portfolio of appreciating assets. We're talking about growth stocks, real estate investment trusts, private equity shares, and other investments specifically chosen for their potential to increase in value without generating much taxable income along the way. She's not looking for dividends or rental income that would trigger immediate tax obligations. She wants pure tax-deferred appreciation. Here's where the math becomes absolutely ridiculous. Let's say Maria's portfolio grows at a conservative 7% annually, which is actually below the historical average for diversified stock investments. After 10 years of compound growth, her $1 million portfolio is now worth nearly $2 million. That's a gain of almost $1 million that has never been touched by the tax man. If Maria were to sell these assets right now, she'd face a brutal tax bill. Between federal capital gains taxes at 20% and state capital gains taxes that could add another 5%, she's looking at paying roughly $250,000 to Uncle Sam. That's a quarter of her entire gain disappearing into government coffers just for the privilege of accessing her own money. But Maria doesn't sell anything. Instead, she walks into her private bank and uses her $2 million portfolio as collateral for a securities-based line of credit. The bank, knowing that her assets are solid and that wealthy clients like Maria represent extremely low risk, offers her access to up to 70% of her portfolio's value. That means Maria can borrow up to $1.4 million without selling a single share of stock. The interest rate on this loan? In today's market, let's say it's around 6.5% annually. So Maria is paying roughly $91,000 per year in interest to access $1.4 million in cash. Now, compare that to the nearly $300,000 tax bill she would have faced by selling her assets once you add up federal capital gains, the net investment income tax, and state taxes. She is effectively deferring a massive tax hit by paying a much smaller annual cost. But wait, it gets even better. While Maria is paying 6.5% interest on her loan, her underlying portfolio continues to grow. If her investments generate an 8% annual return, which is right in line with the S&P 500's historical average, she is actually making a solid profit on this arrangement. Her portfolio grows by $160,000 per year while she pays $91,000 in interest. She's netting $69,000 annually just by using debt instead of selling assets. This is where the strategy becomes almost comically unfair to everyone else. Maria is now living off borrowed money that the government can't tax, while her actual wealth continues to compound in the background. She can buy houses, cars, take vacations, invest in new businesses, or do whatever she wants with that $1.4 million, and none of it shows up as taxable income. As her portfolio continues to grow, her borrowing capacity increases as well. 5 years later, when her assets are worth $3 million, she can refinance her existing debt and potentially borrow even more money at even better rates. The cycle continues indefinitely, with Maria accessing larger and larger amounts of tax-free cash while her underlying wealth grows faster than her debt. Now, I know what you're thinking. This has to catch up with her eventually, right? What happens when Maria dies and all these loans come due? Won't her estate have to sell assets and pay massive taxes to settle the debt? This is where the final phase of the strategy reveals just how tilted the playing field really is. When Maria passes away 30 years later, let's say her portfolio has grown to $8 million through decades of uninterrupted compound growth. She's accumulated several million dollars in outstanding loans over the years, but her assets have grown much faster than her debt. Her heirs inherit the entire $8 million portfolio at its current market value through stepped-up basis rules. Here's the kicker that will make your blood boil if you've ever paid capital gains taxes. All those decades of appreciation from the original $1 million to the final $8 million simply vanish for tax purposes. Maria's heirs can immediately sell $4 million worth of inherited assets to pay off the outstanding loans, and they owe absolutely zero in capital gains taxes. The remaining $4 million becomes their tax-free inheritance. Let's put this in perspective. Maria started with $1 million and managed to provide her family with a $4 million inheritance while living lavishly off borrowed money for 30 years. The total tax bill on this entire transaction, essentially zero. Meanwhile, if you or I tried to build wealth through traditional methods like earning income and saving after-tax dollars, we'd be paying taxes at every step of the process. The scale at which this strategy operates in the real world is absolutely staggering. We're not talking about a few wealthy families gaming the system. Securities-based lending has become a massive industry specifically designed to facilitate this type of tax avoidance. major financial institutions now offer these services as standard products for high net worth clients. The minimum portfolio size to access these lending programs varies by institution, but most require at least $1 million in investable assets. Some premium services require $5 or $10 million to get started. Once you meet these thresholds, the banks compete aggressively for your business, offering increasingly favorable terms as your wealth grows. Interest rates on securities-based loans are typically tied to benchmark rates like the London Interbank Offered Rate plus a spread that decreases as your borrowing capacity increases. Wealthy individuals with $50 million portfolios might pay 2 percentage points less in interest than someone with a $5 million portfolio. The system literally rewards you for being richer. The types of assets that qualify as collateral have expanded dramatically over the past few decades. Traditional stocks and bonds have always been accepted, but now you can borrow against private equity investments, hedge fund shares, real estate investment trusts, and even certain types of collectibles and artwork. The financial industry has essentially created a lending product for every type of asset that wealthy people like to own. What makes this even more infuriating is how the strategy scales with wealth. Someone with $10 million in assets can borrow $7 million and live better than most people ever will while paying minimal taxes. Someone with $100 million can access $70 million in tax-free liquidity and still watch their net worth grow every year. The more money you have, the more effectively this strategy works. The compounding effect over multiple generations creates dynastic wealth that becomes almost impossible to erode through taxation. Each generation inherits assets at stepped-up basis, continues the buy-borrow cycle, and passes even more wealth to their children. Meanwhile, families trying to build wealth through earned income face tax rates that can exceed 40% when you combine federal and state obligations. This explains why wealth inequality has exploded over the past several decades, despite periodic efforts to raise taxes on the wealthy. You can't tax wealth that never gets realized as income, and you can't collect capital gains taxes on assets that never get sold. The buy, borrow, die strategy allows wealthy families to effectively opt out of the tax system that everyone else participates in. The psychological impact of understanding this strategy can be profound, especially if you've spent your entire life believing that everyone plays by the same financial rules. It's like discovering that while you've been playing checkers, the wealthy have been playing three-dimensional chess with a completely different set of rules that nobody ever explained to you. The most frustrating part about all of this isn't just that the strategy exists, it's that our entire political and media discourse around tax policy completely misses the point. Politicians argue about raising or lowering tax rates while the ultra-wealthy sit back and laugh because tax rates are irrelevant when you never actually realize any taxable income. You could raise capital gains taxes to 90% tomorrow and it wouldn't affect someone using the buy, borrow, die strategy one bit because they never sell their assets. This creates a bizarre situation where middle-class families earning $60,000 a year pay higher effective tax rates than billionaires who control assets worth more than the GDP of small countries. The teacher, the nurse, the engineer, and the small business owner all get hammered with income taxes, payroll taxes, and property taxes while watching headlines about how the richest people in America paid less than 1% of their wealth in taxes. What's even more maddening is how the financial media covers this topic. They'll run breathless articles about tax avoidance strategies for regular people that might save you a few $100s on your annual tax bill while completely ignoring the elephant in the room. Meanwhile, wealth management firms are quietly marketing securities-based lending products to their high net worth clients like they're selling miracle cures. The marketing materials for these services read like something out of a fantasy novel. They promise tax-efficient liquidity solutions and wealth optimization strategies that allow you to maintain your investment positions while accessing capital for lifestyle and investment needs. It's corporate speak for helping rich people avoid taxes while everyone else foots the bill for running the country. But here's where things get really interesting from a practical standpoint. The buy, borrow, die strategy isn't just some theoretical concept that exists in academic papers and ProPublica investigations. It's actively shaping investment behavior and market dynamics in ways that most people don't recognize. When you understand that wealthy investors never plan to sell their assets, it completely changes how you think about stock valuations and market bubbles. Like traditional investment analysis assumes that assets will eventually be sold and profits will be realized. But if the largest holders of appreciating assets never sell them, what does that do to market dynamics? It creates artificial scarcity and upward pressure on prices because a significant portion of the supply, Gary, is permanently locked away. The wealthy aren't just avoiding taxes on their gains, they're potentially inflating the value of everyone else's investments by reducing the available supply. So there you have it. The buy, borrow, die strategy isn't some conspiracy theory or financial fairy tale. It's a perfectly legal tax avoidance technique that's been hiding in plain sight for over a century, allowing the ultra wealthy to live like royalty while paying virtually nothing to support the society that made their wealth possible. Now, you understand why billionaires can pay lower tax rates than their secretaries and why wealth inequality keeps exploding despite all the political theater about tax reform. The game was rigged from the start, and most of us didn't even know we were playing by different rules.